Joining me now, we're pleased to have Congresswoman Mejia of New Jersey. She's a vocal advocate for immigration reform, including abolishing ICE. Thank you for coming to be with us today.
Thank you.
Now, the administration says it will stop pursuing vehicles as a part of the sort of practice of ICE officers right now. Is that enough? And do you think it will be in any way able to calm things down?
Well, I think first and foremost, thank you for having me on. I would say that it is clear that this requires a multi-pronged approach to ensure that the American people are kept safe. The bottom line is that ICE agents are woefully underprepared and undertrained. It's clear they are increasing the encounters or violent encounters instead of de-escalating. It is clear that we have a recruitment problem, a training problem, an accountability problem. And
is there a quota problem if there is, in fact, a target for the number of apprehensions or arrests on a daily basis or weekly basis? Do you have an issue with that?
Well, I have an issue with the idea that we have rogue agents that are trigger happy and they're stopping people who aren't even the targets of the enforcement operation. How frightening is it to think that our own government is running around buckshot in our communities without actually having the correct information, the correct target, the correct training, and then in the end, it's resulting in death and murder.
Just to clarify for our audience your position, if someone is here illegally, if they've had a deportation order, do you believe it's appropriate for ICE to remove them?
More than anything, I believe in the Constitution and the fact that every single person in these United States has a right to due process and equal protection. So I would like to see our government actually adhering to the Constitution. I believe that we need to abolish and replace ICE. Of course, we need to have a system, an immigration system, so that we have the safety and integrity of our nation at the forefront. But the bottom line is these practices are putting every American at risk.
You've seen that there are Republicans who are running in swing districts who are using this idea of abolishing ICE or dramatically changing its purpose as a way to appeal to their voters. How do you think this will affect the midterms if Democrats are seen as so out of step with what others might say is a mainstream position?
Well, actually, what I'm seeing is the American voter expressing very clearly that they do not want to see chaos in our streets. I got elected right after the incidents in Minnesota, where it was clear that the American people, whether you're a citizen or undocumented, you are at risk when you have rogue agents running around our cities, trigger happy, shooting people without actually ascertaining if they have the correct target. Furthermore, this, violating our immigration laws or immigration systems should not be a death sentence or should not result in a death sentence. And again, this is putting the American people also in danger.
And do you see this step of pulling back on the vehicle pursuits as a positive?
Well, I think that what we require is de-escalation training. You ask any police officer, any law enforcement agent, and they'll tell you, you do not put your body in front of a vehicle. You have to have certain criteria, training and de-escalation criteria met. And it is clear that our ICE agents do not have it, and it's putting everyone, including those agents, at risk.
Another issue that is really animating, especially the progressive part of the Democratic Party, is the issue of Israel and how the U.S. is going to interact with Israel. Hakeem Jeffries says he plans to oppose a measure to cut U.S. aid to Israel. And where do you stand on that amendment?
The bottom line for me is that the U.S. taxpayers, they desire to have their tax dollars go towards our morals and values. We uphold human rights. We believe in following the rule of law, international law. And so for me, I think that until we can have a commitment of upholding the fullness of human rights for every individual, whether it's individuals in Israel, Gaza, West Bank, then the United States should essentially utilize their resources and funding.
Hold back the money.
Hold back the money to ensure that we are uplifting and supporting human rights.
When you first came to
Congress, the world
Congress,
calls on that.
when you first came to Congress, you did not support, you were non-committal in whether Hakeem Jeffries should be the leader of Democrats in the House. Where are you now? And
there's nothing off the table or on the table. For me, bottom line is that we have to show the American people that we mean business. We have had a president who is clearly moving a Democratic backslide. I think the recent action around the Electoral Assistance Commission shows that this president is trying to grab all the levers of power. I think that the American people, we are clear that we have an affordability crisis, and what they want are their representatives to take concrete action. And what I'm looking for is leadership that will do exactly that.
Is it risky in this political environment to support the current leader of your own party?
I think it's risky in this moment to not listen to the American people. I think it's risky in this moment to not tackle affordability. I think it's risky in this moment to pretend like we are not in the grips of, again, a Democratic backslide that is led by our own president. And I think the Democrats and newly elected members like myself are speaking loud and clear on behalf of the American people who want to see real concrete change and not just a return to the status quo.
Do you believe that the Democratic Party is changing in real time? Is the support for progressive candidates in various races where we've seen pronounced progressive candidates, is this changing, or is this just a moment within the midterms because some of the most active and passionate voters are the most engaged in the primary phase?
I think that Donald Trump and the MAGA movement for the last 10 years have shifted us all the way to the right in a way that has reset the center. And I think American voters are responding with a desire to have bolder policies. And so what may look like far left is actually a return to what would have been common sense ideas a few years ago. The idea that we should take out the profit model out of our healthcare system, the idea that we all should be equal before the laws, the idea that we should not have members of Congress that are enriching themselves, or the president enriching themselves instead of in their moment of public service.
What do you think is the impact of some of these divisions or debate within the party about where they want to be on the spectrum? There are some, as critics would call them, sort of left-wing bomb throwers that are making a lot of noise, getting a lot of attention. And there is this opportunity, given where the president is, the normal traditional swing back in a midterm election. Do you think some of this trying to identify where the party's heart is that harmful to accomplishing a win for the party in November, or is it part of a redefining of the Democratic Party at this moment?
I think what's happening in the Democratic Party is proving that we are vibrant and alive, that our voters are paying attention, that they have ideas, and they're making demands. I think what you're seeing in the Republican Party is a bunch of scared individuals that are falling lockstep with the president that is willing to threaten them and use force, political force against his own party. I think the Democrats, however, are in tune with the American people. We have vibrancy. We have new ideas.
Even to independence when November comes around?
I think that in this moment, what we need to do is listen to the American people. And I would tell you, in the suburbs of New Jersey, what I heard is that people want concrete action that will bring down the cost of living, that they want more money in their pockets, that they want to make sure that our laws are actually equally applied, and that there's tax fairness so that billionaires pay their fair share and that middle-class families have a shot in thriving, not just surviving.
Congresswoman Mejia, we appreciate you coming into studio and spending time with us and talking about these important issues. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.